there are little things that employers can do as an employer to respect and understand what's going on in a person's life when they have a young child.
Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. This is the show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by the fantastic Kelly Beaver. Now, Kelly is the Chief Executive of Ipsos UK. She's been with the organisation for over a decade, was previously Managing Director of the Public Affairs Division, which supports government clients to monitor and understand public opinion, behaviours, societal trends, designing of public services, and of course, policy. Kelly's led a wide range of initiatives, and in addition to the work at Ipsos, she also is a trustee and non-exec of varying other positions that we're going to be hearing more about today. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thanks, Leila. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. And I know we met in real life, which is an unusual thing these days, fabulously, a number of months ago. And I wonder, before we kind of dive deep into talking about data and trends and all aspects of holistic diversity, whether you could tell those who are listening in a little bit more about the personal and professional journey, because you are wearing a number of hats now and taking up the role of a really well-known market research organisation in the UK. It'd be great to hear how that journey has been thus far.
Well, Leila, it won't escape your listeners that I am not English. I'm the first non-English person to run what used to be called Ipsos Mori in the UK, now Ipsos UK. And so I hail from Northern Ireland. I am a mother of a fantastic 7-year-old daughter, but also of a small dog, and I live with my husband in London. I've been working in the production of evidence for government policymakers, but also private organisations for over the last 15 to 20 years now, and my role with Ipsos, as you mentioned, started 10 years ago, predominantly supporting government with their decision making. The journey itself has been a mix. I've worked for KPMG, PwC, small organisations, big organisations, and the key thing that keeps me motivated is working with fabulous people in each of these places, and Ipsos is a very special place to work. But also the kind of work that we do for our clients, because you can see that you're making a really tangible difference every single day.
Well, thanks so much, Kelly. And I adore the Irish accent, as I'm sure many people do.
I don't actually, but it's my accent, but I don't enjoy it.
Oh, I absolutely love the Irish accent. I love the Irish accent, I love the Scottish accent, many different accents. But if I may dive into some of the early years, did you ever foresee yourself being chief exec, and was it market research specifically? And talk to us a little bit about some of the early family years over in Ireland.
Okay, well, I'm actually an economist by background, and I didn't start out my career in market or social research. I started it out as an economist for PwC actually at the time. And no, I probably didn't see myself working in this industry necessarily, but there had always been very strong synergies between research, economics, so understanding the whole person, looking at how people make decisions, how people choose the different behaviours that they're going to make around whether it's a product or a policy. And so there were lots of synergies with it, which I discovered about 10 years ago. But growing up, yes, it was quite embarrassing. I probably had quite strong drive to lead organisations, and definitely aspired to move to London from Belfast, and I did that in my mid-20s. But I did want to lead large organisations. I take real joy in some of the governance parts of leadership and the administrative part of leadership, of which there is a lot. But you have a real opportunity when you're running organisations of scale to look after and look out for a really impressive group of professionals as well. And I do enjoy that nurturing part of leadership.
I absolutely concur, and it's so fascinating to see what's happened over the last decade more when it comes to the type of leadership, humanistic-led leadership, evidential-based leadership, and there has been a significant change societally as well. We see chief executives now being expected to speak out so much more about societal issues. ESG is all over the place at the moment, and we're seeing this explode off the scenes. And so genuinely, I do believe that some of these best kind of chief executives and leaders that we will see today are those that come from a place of real strong emotional intelligence, as well as all of the other factors that you mentioned there, through to a deep understanding of research and scientific methodology, all of the factors that go into ultimately leading organizations for the sustainable long term. And talk to us a little bit about some of the other honorary positions that you have, because I know that you are passionate about academia, you're passionate about charity work, you're really keen on education, understandably, as a visiting senior research fellow at King's College in London.
Yeah, so I do some roles outside of Ipsos, and I've had to be quite careful in making sure that I take on roles that I can commit to fully, and I fully believe in the cause, because obviously jobs like this are quite full on. And the ones that I've selected have been ones where they are about the use of evidence in decision making, and also supporting early intervention. So making sure that children, young people have the best opportunities when they start out in life, and helping them overcome some of those barriers, because that really early stage in your life actually it can really make or break the opportunities that you're able to avail of later in life. So the stuff I do, I am a board member for the Campaign for Social Sciences, which advocates the use of the full range of the social sciences discipline, which is everything from history, economics, and obviously all of the research that we do, the data scientists, statisticians, all of their disciplines fall within the social sciences. And then also the King's Policy Institute partnership, where I'm a senior fellow there, which works in with government policy and helps using research to help shape, design, create real understanding of people and society. And then the last one, which is one very close to my heart, is the Early Intervention Foundation, where I'm a trustee. That organisation does work to help improve the evidence base on what works to help young people get the best start that they need in order to have a full and fulfilling life later on.
Love to dive, if I may, into some of your favourite subjects, actually, which are this early stage intervention side, and particularly interesting at the moment. As you know, I'm awaiting birth of our first child. I know you are a mother yourself and passionate about education, and it's really got me thinking a lot about the system, the systematic pieces that we see within our institutions, within our organizations. And the earlier we can start, surely, the better and better the outcomes ultimately will be. I remember at school being taught, very classical kind of, history around British history, around, things happening within the world, but never was there necessarily, talk of, in my case, was interesting to me was, the background of the Chinese in Britain, and perhaps some of the things that we want to hear about from a racial and equity side of things when it comes to, Black history and such. And I wonder whether you might be able to talk a little bit about not only about your journey of kind of parenthood and early interventions, but also where we have historically seen some of the biggest challenges, and how we, through the power of research, are looking to change that narrative.
So in the very early years, which is sort of the 0 to your pregnancy, actually, at the stage that you're at now, right through to those first 5 years of life, as I mentioned, they're absolutely critical for the future development and lifelong happiness for young people and into early adulthood. But some of the things as parents that we tend to focus on, because let's face it, you're going to be really busy, Leila, whenever you have this little baby, because you will have all of the things that you were doing before, but all of a sudden, this new life appears, and it is all consuming, all demanding, and you will want to spend time nurturing and developing your tiny child. And actually, the time that we have available sometimes crowds out some of the things that you would like to do with a young child, whether that is active play, so sitting and actively playing with your child, working not just on their cognitive development, but also their social and interactive skills, so making sure that you're taking them to socialize with different people, and also how you react whenever they do something that isn't necessarily the kind of behavior that you want that child to exhibit in an external environment, how you react to that, because they're learning everything from you at that particular point in time. And I think one of the challenges you have as working parents is you really are spent and used up at the end of your day. You are feeling increasingly tired, because by the time you get home to see your children, you have given your intellectual all and probably a physical commute in the midst of it as well. And having that bit of energy left at the end of the day is quite something for people. So I think there are little things that employers can do as an employer to respect and understand what's going on in a person's life when they have a young child that really does need them, not just for the cognitive, the sort of educational development, but the social skills development and the behavioural development that needs to go alongside it. And it cannot all be down to nursery or childcare providers. And you won't want it to be, because it's your child. And so as an employer, our flexibility with people at various key points in their life, whether they have dependents and caring responsibilities or whether they don't, is something that is absolutely critical, to give them the mental and time space to be able to engage fully with their tiny people when it really, really matters. So we've brought in a number of supportive policies, but also just ways of working at Ipsos, things like our equal parental leave. This is not shared parental leave where they have to split it between them. We give equal parental leave so our men and women can be fully engaged in their children's lives at that critical point in time, and that is paid, and it is really a critical thing that we brought in a number of years ago, and now the culture that comes behind the policy is really bedding in, which is fabulous to see. But also just flexibility to be there for your children, and key points in the day, where people work from, the time and they start and they finish, and also when they do their hours in general, and just where we can be flexible, being the flexible.
Flexibility is something that it's almost an absolute imperative now. Absolute imperative. I know there's a huge amount on the work that you've done with data and trends that foresee the future of work and the narrative of what our children, our children's children will want to see ultimately when it comes to the brand behind which the organization that they wish to go and work for. It's fundamental necessary is talent and making sure that those future generations, of which we now have, I think it's five in the workforce, I believe, and millennials dominating the vast majority of that, is that they demand a lot of this, not only flexibility, but also the capability to really put your ethos and brand and purpose at the heart and soul of the company, often even before profit. It's quite fascinating to see. And knowing employer flexibility, care responsibilities, balancing all of these different areas of diversity with the modern world that we live in now. I wonder whether you could share with us some more of the challenges and interventions that you're looking at within Ipsos to be able to keep all different levels and generations within the workforce as happy as we possibly can make them.
Yes, so I looked through all of when I took this role, which was actually just at the back end of 2021, I did take time and have a look at all of the policies that we had in place by key life stage for people. So many of the younger sort of new entrants to the labour market and into Ipsos won't necessarily have been through some of the key life transitions that impact on you and impact on your career. We know, for example, that our women between the ages of 30 and 40, key childbearing period, tend to step back from the workplace for a period of time, and it has historically impacted on their pay, impacted on their bonus and our pay gap generally at that level. So we know there are some key life transitions that impact on women, but also women from ethnic minorities more than women from white background, more so. We know that that's something that we can see in our data. And just looking at the policies that we have to support things that are more common by way of life experiences and things that are perhaps more common than we realize, but not necessarily talked about as openly. So whether that might be a mental health issue, or it might be a baby loss issue, or policies that support people in those moments where they feel they need to know what their rights and what they're able to do to protect and look after themselves in that moment of time as well, and making sure all our people are supported. So I did look, and we have subsequently brought in a few new policies. We were already, and I will say this, we were already progressive, thoughtful employer, and we just want to keep making sure that we are adapting and improving our practices. And the key thing for us is making sure that the culture at all levels, no matter whether the line manager is a senior manager or a very senior manager or they're a junior manager, they're all doing things in the same way. And that's one of our biggest ongoing challenges. But so we now have baby loss policies, fertility policies, which were two we brought in recently, but also for our workforce, where we have a lot of people who have come in from other countries to work in the UK. We've also introduced now for everybody 6 weeks working abroad in a year, so that they can work from another country without any particular challenges from an employment perspective. And also bank holidays, because there's a sort of Christian holiday, bank holiday culture in the UK, and not all of our staff are from the same religion, the same cultural background, and actually for them they need more flexibility. It would be a benefit to have more flexibility about when they take those bank holidays. So those are some of the things we've added to the policies we already had in place to ensure that we're inclusive as a workforce and a workplace. And we're also allowing people to be their best selves when they come to work at Ipsos, not just in work, but at home as well with their families.
What's really nice is there's a beautiful dovetail between the policies, practices, the data, the procedures, and also ultimately what is, hearts and minds and real key moments in life to a point that are happening. And I'm hearing that this is very much, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a cookie cutter approach to success for all of these different aspects of diversity, inclusion, belonging, mental health, baby loss, working abroad, different cultures, all of those equally as important as another. And I'll touch on some of the pieces that you mentioned there around fertility as well. My husband and I went through IVF and do speak about this relatively publicly. And it's one of those things, interestingly, where the second you mention it, people then say, "Oh, we went through a fertility journey as well," or we experienced baby loss, which again, I'm so pleased to hear that it's getting the airtime now that it truly deserves, because it has been many years to watch these kinds of subjects really come out of the woodwork in terms of the taboo nature that they have had. Each of those facets that you mentioned there, from parenthood and caring responsibilities, ultimately mental health, wellness, they have they have many different complexities within each of them. And so it's almost the progressive nature of the interventions you talk about, the data, the ensuring that we stay forward thinking and modern with this. It's a constant evolution, and knowing that there are so many different pieces in place within Ipsos, which is such a historic brand, is just superb.
Well, whenever I sent out the email recently announcing the fertility and baby loss policies, I got so many emails back. I got emails back from people saying, "I'm so glad that Ipsos is doing this. I lost a baby 18 years ago." And that's what, they're telling me they lost a baby a long time ago, before this was even talked about or policies were in place. And the message is, "I had a supportive line manager at the time, but if I hadn't, I don't know what I would have done." Or a different experience where they were back in work because they felt pressured themselves. They put it on themselves, but they felt pressured to not take too long and to come back into the workplace quickly, and to not see it as a major life trauma, which effectively it is. But actually having the policies in place give people the ability to take that time and to feel supported to take that time to help themselves recover to the extent they can from a crisis like that.
Indeed. And it's that trickle effect that you're describing there, the fact that you as a leader are so willing to be open and candid and talk about this. And ultimately, as knowing your data inside out, data leaves little place often for there to be hiding spaces anyway. But the fact that there is data, there is the personal experience, the candid, open authenticity and honesty at the top, it creates that trickle effect of safety to allow others then to come forth and to share their stories, and for us to be able to accommodate differences and ultimately drive, as you are so well, these unique interventions and policies and procedures. It's a really great way that we're describing both of the two, because you cannot have one without the other, and it's far more complex. It's far more complex than I believe often meets the eye. Now, talking of intersectionality and talking of all of these different areas that we have covered on, I know that Ipsos has a in-depth program of employee resource groups, or often called staff networks, or in some cases called business resource groups, which I particularly like because I think it denotes the business strategic priority of the importance of these types of impact groups. Talk to us a little bit about the employee resource groups and kind of the sponsorship programs that you have when it comes to these different levels. Again, knowing that diversity and inclusion sees more success when we have interventions wherever possible at the different levels of the classic corporate hierarchy, quote unquote.
No, it's a very, very good point. So we have a program called Belong, which we run at Ipsos. The Belong group is chaired by a member of my management committee in the UK. So they have a seat at the top table in the UK. And beneath them is a group of networks. Each network looks at a very specific topic around inclusion and diversity, but they do work closely together. So the Working Parents Network works very closely with the Gender Balance Network. The Neurodiversity Network works very closely with other networks. And our International Employees Network similarly, and in particular, was really helpful for us around some of the tensions we face in Ukraine and Russia, and some of our own employees who are based in the UK with family back in Ukraine. So these groups, they have individual chairs, and we tend to have two individuals at the top of the group themselves, and they have a mix of roles. So the role is to make sure that there is a voice to me and to the management team for that particular group across a range of things that our organization does. What kind of thought leadership do we put out? Is it how it needs to be for a company as diverse as Ipsos? Is our research really highlighting the right kind of issues, especially when it's self-funded research that we're doing ourselves? Are we using it to maximum benefit to help understand society and shape some of the important agendas of the day? But also, they work to change some of our HR policies and protocols. So the Working Parents Group have recently redone our carers pledge and made sure that that is more fit for purpose as we're moving into hybrid working, and that is here to stay. So the groups have a very strong voice to the central management team, but they also shape and change policies, and they meet and they regularly talk and discuss some of the key issues right across the business, but they make sure they take that discussion, because I don't just want 8 individual talking shops, but these take the points from those discussions and feed them directly into how we do business, how we are together, and how we work as an organization. And that's been really effective. Some groups have been more effective than others, I would say, but that is possibly linked to they have meaty issues to tackle, like our gender pay gap or the carers pledge, which was something I wanted refreshed anyway. So they had really targeted interventions that we wanted to see them make, but they themselves come up with what's important too. You also wanted to hear a little bit about our sponsorship program, because this is something that we've brought in recently to help make sure that none of the talent that we have in our business is being blocked by invisible barriers or implicit bias. And actually, we do just need to make sure that we are able to help pull people through into those top roles within our organization. We are not as ethnically diverse at the top in the research industry in general, and in Ipsos in the UK, but it's an industry-wide issue, and we can't just keep saying this is an industry-wide issue and therefore there's nothing we can do about it as a company. There definitely is, and we're trialing this sponsorship piece where our senior management committee members will be sponsoring individuals with talent in our organization to help pull them through into the more senior roles.
So what you're talking to really there, Kelly, is progression, not perfection. You're absolutely right. We cannot continue to just follow the narrative that says this is a challenging thing to do, therefore we cannot put people into senior roles that would be from certain different backgrounds. But to see these changes happen within the very short 6 months that you've been chief exec, clearly you're having a fantastic impact, which is brilliant. And I recently came back from New York and met with a number of your leads on the employee resource groups. And I can tell you they were fantastic, and they felt fully supported by senior leadership. And that is really what we need to see. No good in having employee resource groups that are there for a nice to have, quote unquote. Actually, they need to have that true sponsorship and that true buy-in from the top in order to enable them to truly shape policy and to continue the evolution of what good looks like ultimately. So really pleased that you touched on that side as well. And interestingly, I'd love to know your thoughts on the data side of things. But when we compared the UK McKenzie-Delis review with the UK McKenzie-Delis review, which of course was so over the moon that is backed and supported by Ipsos, we saw that there was a growing trend for US employee resource groups to start to even be remunerated in some senses, because historically these are groups that have been fueled purely by passion as an addition onto the day job. They are now really starting, we believe, to make their mark now as strategic business vehicles. And anyone who's listening in, who's heard some of the examples that you gave there around the sponsorship piece, that is absolutely critical. It is not just the let's pop them in place because it ticks a number of our boxes. Actually having true buy-in and understanding to utilize these strategically, these groups, is a subject that, well, you can tell I could quite easily talk about for another whole podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And your point on it being a job for passionate people and not recognised formally. So that's a really important piece. And I think historically, these groups and the individuals leading them, and we interview for the leads of these roles. I interviewed for the new leads of our Reach group just recently, and we have 2 new fabulous heads, co-heads for that. The service we are operating with, I've got 17 beneath me, 17 individual businesses in the UK, which we call service lines, and then other parts of the business as well. And within the service lines, the individuals who take on additional responsibilities, it should be built into the full working week for them. So they will dedicate a portion of their full-time job to having this particular hat. And we are looking now at ways in which we can find ways to thank the individuals who do give not just their time, but a huge amount of passion, which is more meaningful.
Indeed. And before we run out of time, Kelly, I'd love to ask a couple of lightning round questions before we go into, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to a minute perhaps to respond to each. But a question I love to ask everyone, chief execs and others, even heads of employee resource groups, is what does diversity and inclusion and or belonging and equity mean to you personally? Because I really adore the fact that it means many different things to many different people.
Yeah, so I've been in the professional services industry for quite a wee while now, different organisations. And when I first started, I think there was really this piece which people were mooting around being blind to the characteristics of what somebody comes into a room with. And after working in the industry for some time, I fundamentally disagree that we need to be blind to those characteristics. I think we need to be absolutely attuned to the characteristics and the backdrop and the context to which somebody is sitting in front of us, either in those key decision points that we have as leaders, which are pay, progression, recruitment, retention, where we're dealing with individuals. We need to be acutely aware of the characteristics of the individual and the additional barriers they may have had to overcome in order to be in that position at that particular time, and to make sure that we provide the support that's required and pull people through, because they will, unforeseen to us, but they will be facing additional implicit barriers to either coming into a role or progressing through a role. So I think for me, I feel like I've got a very privileged position leading Ipsos. And so what I can do to create a level playing field, a supportive level playing field for all of our people, and make sure that we can also get additional diverse talent into our business. And we're looking at the whole talent pool and not just the talent pool that would naturally come to us anyway.
Absolutely. It is about all of those different visible and invisible areas, and allyship, to your point, as well as sponsorship critically, is the only way that we are ultimately able to get there. We talk about privilege. I'm glad that we talk more and more about privilege, but ultimately this is a sliding scale. We have privilege in many different areas and not in others. And so where we can lend our voices, our power, our capabilities to other minority groups and continue to learn, is what we need to see, and vice versa. Where I may not, well, I never will be able to understand the experience of a young Black person, say, within the workplace. What I can understand and what I can champion is those stories and those initiatives and interventions that we need to see to level the playing field. But on the other hand, as a proud Chinese British woman, I can certainly support and see the world through a different lens. And so it's that makeup, that capability to look at equity, to your point, in order to level that playing field, and keeping the momentum and the foot on the gas in order to do that ultimately. Now, a couple of lightning round questions before we end. I'm going to start off with the hardest one first, which I love asking everyone. But what is your secret to success, or is there one?
Success, making positive progress, is linked to a mix of talent and hard work. But one of the things that's always kept me in a good stead is that it's not just what you do, but how you go about doing it. Actually, because in more junior roles in organizations, it's all about the what you do, the talent that you have, the skills that you can bring. And the further up you progress, the how you go about doing things and how you are personally with other people makes a huge difference to your level of success and progression, and quite frankly, your life enjoyment.
How about authentic leadership? I know that's a term that's probably overused almost now, but true authentic leadership, what does that mean to you?
So for me, being authentic means recognizing that I know some things and I know other things less well, and actually listening really well, taking on board other people's feedback and seeking out that feedback in a transparent way. And that keeps leadership authentic, because you're there effectively to serve the team, the business, and you have to be in listening mode a huge proportion of the time.
How about who has inspired you the very most throughout your life, your career? Indeed, I'm sure there's many.
So yeah, I've been asked this question a few times and I really struggle with it. And it's not because of a lack of inspirational people around me, but more because they all have inspired something at a particular time. And from my first boss, who was a female director in PwC at the time, and I was just in awe of her because she was on her second baby. She was back to work, bouncing around, delivering hugely. And I just thought, my goodness, how are you juggling all of that? And I thought, goodness, I don't know why, but I thought that was a great role model at the time. And she was fabulous. And then, but more recently, the kind of people that I've had the opportunity to meet, like Julia Gillard, who was the first female Prime Minister in Australia. She has such a lovely way in how she does things, not just what she does, but how she goes about them. I remember the first dinner I had with her, the morning after, she sent me a lovely note thanking me for coming to the dinner, wishing me well in some radio interviews that I was doing the next day. She didn't have to take the time to send me a thank you note the next day. I was delighted to be at dinner with her, but she's just that amount of poise and elegance in the way you do something. I think I took a lot from her on that.
Such brilliant stories. I feel much how you did in your early example there at the moment. And so I'm sure, just as I am, there's many listening in thinking, goodness, it's hard sometimes when you're looking how far up there is to go up that mountain, actually celebrating those pieces along the way, to your point, and knowing that there's lots of people, there's lots of inspiration where we look at these life moments, coming back to some of the earlier conversations. And finally, if you could go back in time, let's go back to Ireland perhaps, and some of the early days. Is there any advice that you might give to your younger self, or someone who is in a similar position to you were then?
Goodness me. I think Northern Ireland, which is the bit that I'm from. I think back when I was growing up, certainly it was probably tricky times. And going back, I think the job that I've got today and the lifestyle I've got today would have seemed like a very distant dream. I still wanted it. Don't get me wrong, I wanted it, but it would have been a distant dream. And so I think going back then, just keep the faith, things are going to come good.
Kelly, thank you so much. It's been a joy having you on the podcast today. And in summary, for all who are listening, if you didn't manage to catch all of the key hints, tips, nuggets of wisdom, do not worry at all, because you'll be able to catch up on all of the show notes in accessible formats post today's show. Some of the key learning points that I've thoroughly enjoyed are talking about such a range of subjects, actually. The executive sponsorship, the leadership, the trickle effect, early interventions when it comes to education. Kelly, make research sound super sexy as well. I think that the market research industry with having the science, the data, the methodology behind decision-making rationale, whilst also then being able to dovetail that so beautifully into the personal stories and the emotional intelligence required in order to truly see good leadership and organization through what is ultimately a long-term game plan and a pretty, we've been through turbulent times of late. And so, ensuring that critical resilience and that all of these different complex facets are married up is incredibly important. And finally, certainly learned some inspirational things myself, keeping the faith, ensuring that deep listening is important, but also the thanks and gratitude that you talked about towards the end. So important. It is those small words of gratitude and thanks that sometimes make all the difference, and the things that we remember when it comes to talking about those key life moments and the times when we're with someone that we admire that really matter. So thank you so much for being an inspiration to many people, and for the work that you do. We really appreciate it, and thanks again so much for all of the work that you and Ipsos do when it comes to championing change. My name is Leila McKenzie-Delis, founder and CEO of DAL Global. You've been listening to Kelly Beaver, the CEO of Ipsos UK. Visit us at www.dalglobal.org/podcast, or you can visit us directly in the DAL Global Network app in the App Store. Take care, and we'll see you again next week.